Welcome to vintagesf. I'm Richard Rempel, and this is a follow-up video to my video on A.E. van Vogt and the golden age of science fiction. I'll have a link to that video in the description below, but today we want to talk about one of A.E. van Vogt's most famous novels, Slan. Slan was first serialized in the magazine Astounding Science Fiction from September to December of 1940, and then it was published in hardcover in 1946 by Arkham House. According to Wikipedia, there were only 4,051 copies printed of this book. So if you find that Arkham first print, I think you should pick it up, if it's a reasonable price, of course. The Hugo Awards, those named after Hugo Gernsback from the Amazing Story magazines, he was the editor, they had awards that were retro awards for best novels. And this novel won a Hugo Retro Award in 2016 for the best novel of 1941. Why 1941? Well, novels for the Hugos have to be 1 year removed from their publication, and so they were going by the publication date in the magazine. Slan is set many years into the future. There's been some sort of war with the Slans. Slans are evolved humans, but we don't know at the beginning of the novel whether they are genetically modified humans or whether it is a natural evolution. Those who support the genetically modified theory call them Slans because the scientist supposedly that has done this experimentation with children is Samuel Lan. So S-Lan, Slan. It's really a very derogatory term, but it's used throughout the novel to describe these people. And there's more than one type of Slan as well. First off, what is a Slan? Slans are super intelligent and can read minds. They seem to possess near limitless stamina. You can visually identify a Slan because they have tendrils on their heads. They seem to be part of that ability to read minds. And there's a second type of Slans related to the first Slans. Now, the background to this novel is that there was a great Slan war where the Slans almost took over Earth, but the normal human beings, let's say, fought them back and have brought them almost to the point of extinction. They are hunted. They're not allowed to achieve adulthood within this society. And this society has become a dictatorship, a worldwide dictatorship. There's also a second type of Slans. There's a Slan that can hide among humans that do not have tendrils. They also are immune to being read by regular Slans. That means their mind being read. They have that defense still. So that's still part of their ability of being Slans. So they hide within the normal population and they don't want to be outed by any types of Slans that there are. So with this oppressive world government, Slans are hiding or on the run. And then there's also Slans that are blending into the regular population. That's the central premise here, but the story really is an action story, almost from beginning to end. And we start with a young Slan, Jommy, who's a 9-year-old, and his mother, and they've been detected in the streets of Centropolis, and there's people, agents, out to get them. I want to read a portion of the novel to you so you get an idea of the action that van Vogt loves to use within his stories. This comes right at the beginning of the novel. Astounding Science Fiction, September 1939, Slan by A.E. van Vogt. The first serial to win Astounding's rare Nova designation. Van Vogt's great story presents the tale of a Superman, but a Superman story such as science fiction has never before seen. Illustrated by Schneemann. His mother's hand felt cold, clutching his. Her fear as they walked hurriedly along the street was a quiet, swift pulsation that throbbed from her mind to his. 100 other thoughts beat against his mind from the crowds that swarmed by on either side and from inside the buildings they passed. But only his mother's thoughts were clear and coherent and afraid. "They're following us, Jommy," her brain telegraphed. "They're not sure, but they suspect. Somebody reported us, and our house has already been raided. Jommy, if the worst comes, you know what to do. We've practiced it often enough. And Jommy, don't be afraid. Don't lose your head. You may be only 9 years old, but a 9-year-old Slan is as intelligent as any 15-year-old human being. Don't be afraid, no matter what happens." Don't be afraid. Easy to advise, Jommy thought, and hid the thought from her. She wouldn't like that concealment, that distorting shield between them. but there were thoughts that had to be kept back. She mustn't know he was afraid too. "Jommy, do you feel their hostility? Can you sense things over a distance yet?" He strained. The steady wave of vagueness that washed from the crowds pressing all around grew into a swirling nightmare of mind clamor. From somewhere came the stray wisp of thought. "They say they are still Slans alive in this city in spite of all precautions, and the order is to shoot them on sight." "But isn't that dangerous?" came a second thought, obviously a question asked aloud, though Jommy caught only the mental picture. "I mean, a perfectly innocent person might be killed by mistake." "That's why they seldom shoot on sight. They try to capture them and then examine them. Their internal organs are different from ours, you know, and their heads. Jommy, can you feel them about a block behind us, in a big car, waiting for reinforcements to close in on us from in front? They're working fast, too fast. Can you catch their thoughts, Jommy?" He couldn't. No matter how hard he reached out with his mind and strained and perspired with the fierceness of his trying, that was where her mature powers surpassed his precocious instincts. She could span distances and disentangle remote vibrations into coherent pictures. He wanted to turn around and look, but he didn't dare. His small, though long, legs twinkled underneath him, half running to keep up with his mother's impatient pace. It was terrible to be small and helpless, young and inexperienced, when the very fabric of their life demanded the full strength of maturity, the straining alertness of adult Slan mentality. Within 1.5 pages, we get that sense of urgency, that feeling of being hunted, that idea that there's a dictator here in this world. This novel rushes forward from action scene to action scene with big concepts thrown in. There's also some revelations and some unexpected turns in the plot. Will Jommy and his mother escape? What will happen if Jommy is separated from his mother? Are there other Slans that Jommy can connect with? Now, this was published in magazine form in the latter part of 1940, so let's assume this was written earlier in that year. This was the time that things were going wrong in Germany. This story could also relate to Van Vogt's own background of being Mennonite. These are people from Holland and Germany that eventually came to Canada. We know his family came to Canada prior to 1912. Van Vogt was born here in Canada, in my province, Manitoba. The Mennonites who came to Manitoba were escaping persecution or seeking a better opportunity for themselves. They were promised religious freedom and an opportunity to serve alternate service in wars, that their pacifism would be respected. Now, that didn't mean that all Mennonites were pacifists, and in fact, Van Vogt served in a capacity in Ottawa. His eyesight was too bad to be able to be part of the army itself. So I think a little bit of that Mennonite experience might come into what we have here with the Slans and the dictatorship and the oppressive governments. Some people have also mentioned that perhaps this is a little bit of a biblical story as well. In this way, it really lined up with some of the dystopic novels of that day and age. Slans were also of that Superman type trope, the possibility of evolution or genetic manipulation. I wonder if A.E. Van Vogt read Olaf Stapledon's Odd John, a great novel from the mid-1930s that had to deal with the next step of evolution of humanity. One other point that I want to make is that A.E. Van Vogt was very much an influence for some of the writers that followed him, like Alfred Bester or Philip K. Dick. They had those fast, frenetic plots, taking their protagonist and throwing him forward in the worlds that were created. Now, this pulpy need to be thrust forward by action sometimes detracted a little bit from the world building for me. But there's no denying that this type of story really sold well to the magazines. Now, I've read a couple other novels by A.E. Van Vogt, namely The Voyage of the Space Beagle. That takes his first story that was published, Black Destroyer, and a couple other stories about the spaceship that was involved in there and puts them together. This is called a fix-up novel. And I've also read The World of Null A. Now, I found The Voyage of the Space Beagle to be very entertaining. Action-oriented, as I said, frenetic energy to it, and it was a spaceship and its crew and the dangers that they faced in their missions. You might think, in fact, that Star Trek could have come from this template. The World of Null A, on the other hand, had that frenetic throwing forward of the protagonist, but the protagonist, in my mind, just seemed to have things happen to him, and I really didn't understand completely this idea of Null A, Aristotelian thought. So I didn't really appreciate that one as much, and I know that some of you have been disappointed with my review of that one. I think, though, that Slan is more straightforward, and I think the idea of evolution or of genetic manipulation and the Superman is something that is a more common theme that many people can identify with. I give Slan an 8 out of 10. Now, its importance to Canadian science fiction and to the Golden Age probably would take that up at least another notch to a 9 out of 10. So I'm curious, have you read Slan? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep reading.